No shot. Wait, hold on. We'll read this because wait, this can't be real. Trump calls for abolishing the debt ceiling? President-elect Donald Trump said Thursday that Congress should get rid of the debt ceiling a day after he came out against a deal reached by congressional lawmakers to fund the government before a shutdown occurs. In a phone interview with NBC News, Trump said getting rid of the debt ceiling entirely would be the smartest thing Congress could do. I would support that entirely. Unironically, though, I mean, we should get rid of the debt ceiling. But how funny that this guy who talked about responsible spending and balancing the budget and blah, 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 that now and I bet all the Republicans are going to jump on board with it. Well, actually, maybe getting rid of the debt ceiling, maybe that's actually a really good idea. Holy Trump suggested that the debt ceiling is a meaningless concept and that no one knows for sure what would happen if it were to someday be breached. That's true. It doesn't mean anything except psychologically, he said. That's also true. I don't believe this is a real Trump interview. Is somebody feeding him lines? Wait, what?
Push 3.
I want our viewers to feel seen and heard. Suddenly they change the rules. I want them to feel like I'm their voice. So what they are screaming at their television, why isn't the media talking about this? Why aren't they asking that? The migrant issue. I'm hoping the way we approach the show, the questions we ask, are the same things you are asking your friends and family. But the question on everyone's mind, that's what we're trying to get at. Because we need the answers, and I think our audience does too.
Thank you. We needed you.
Garrett Hake just spoke with Trump over the phone. Let's start there. Garrett, what else did President-elect Trump say?
Well, Anna, he was pretty unconcerned.
It's no debt ceiling. It was modern monetary theory memes. No. Whether or not you have a debt ceiling doesn't have much to do with anything except for, I don't know how many, some countries have debt ceilings and some countries don't, or maybe most of them don't. But basically, the United States government has a maximum amount of money that we're allowed to have as far as debt goes, but it's meaningless because every time we approach the debt ceiling, we just raise it. However, especially recently, what's happening is every time we approach the debt ceiling, people are like, oh, wait, well, let's negotiate by playing chicken with our, like, literally suiciding the entire country. Like, we're not going to vote to raise the debt ceiling unless we get whatever we want legislatively. So people have been, like, getting more and more brazen with shutting down the government or playing chicken with the debt ceiling. And it's probably not good that we have to keep voting to raise the debt ceiling. It probably should just be uncapped.
Concerned with the prospect of a shutdown. He essentially wants to see some of these issues, most notably the debt ceiling, which wasn't even part of this conversation really a day ago, be cleared off his plate before he takes office. On the subject of the speaker, I asked if he still has confidence in Mike Johnson. He said, we'll see. He was clearly very disappointed with the work product that came out of the speaker's office in form of that 1,500-page continuing resolution that was essentially nuked yesterday by he and Elon Musk. But the majority of our conversation was about the debt ceiling. Trump told me he's not just keen to see it lifted, as we've all seen and covered so many times in the past, but he'd like to see it gotten rid of entirely, something that's been discussed really by Democrats mostly in the past, but something that he said he would welcome and would actively campaign.
Apparently, someone in chat said only Denmark and the U.S. have a debt ceiling that is set on an absolute amount rather than a percentage of GDP.
Campaign for. He argued that the debt ceiling doesn't work for its purpose. It doesn't actually control debt at all, and that its effect is.
Wait, this might be the smartest thing I've ever heard Donald Trump say about anything ever. Unironically, I'm not exaggerating. This might be the only time in the history of all of Trump talking about anything having to do with government that he has correctly identified a thing that the government does that doesn't suit its original purpose and doesn't really make sense to continue on. What the? Somebody must have given him his talking point. What the fuck? What?
It's merely psychological, and it is used, again, most often by Republicans, as sort of a choke point to get something they want out of the majority when they are in the minority.
What's his motive here? Well, the motive is that he doesn't have to worry about a government shutdown when he's in office, because now his administration could just spend like crazy. If you were a Democrat, you should hit him back and say, we'll lift the debt ceiling after Trump's next term, because Donald Trump said he was going to balance the budget anyway, so why does he need to lift the debt ceiling? He shouldn't need to lift the debt ceiling, right? You're going to cut spending anyway, so who cares, right?
He told me in no uncertain terms this morning he'd like to see it gotten rid of entirely. I can tell you just within the last few minutes, Elizabeth Warren, the Democratic senator from Massachusetts, got the opposite end of the political spectrum on so many issues, tweeted her agreement.
Even if you had...
When has U.S. raised debt ceiling historically? It was raised 74 times from March 1962 to May 2011. 18 times under Ronald Reagan, 8 times under Bill Clinton, and 7 times under George W. Bush. And then they raised the debt ceiling 14 times from 2001 to 2016. House rejects Trump-backed plan on government shutdown. Oof. House Republicans rejected the bill. Damn. What the fuck? Senator Mike Lee. House Republicans should hire either Elon Musk or Vivek Ramaswamy as their next speaker. Like, is that like a thing? Like to be the speaker? Or does he mean Speaker of the House? What happens if they don't vote to raise the debt ceiling? I'd be open to supporting Elon Musk for Speaker of the House. Doge can only truly be accomplished by reining in Congress to enact real government efficiency. The establishment needs to be shattered just like it was yesterday. This could be the way. And by establishment, she means like the United States. Rand Paul floats Elon Musk for House Speaker. When was the last time Speaker of the House wasn't in Congress? He avoided the question by changing the topic. I avoided what question? Why did I click the link on this? Every single Speaker of the House has been a sitting House member. Okay, so. They asked what happens if you hit the debt ceiling. Well, part of the U.S. budget, I mean, there's a few things that happen. So part of there's two big, well, there's a few big, really important parts of the U.S. budget. One is payment of interest on our debt. I don't know this exactly, but I'm pretty sure that, Econoboys in chat, you can tell me, is the interest we pay on the debt, is that, when you talk about like cash flows from treasury bonds, because if you have a treasury bond, aren't you entitled to some like monthly or yearly cash deposit or some bullshit? Am I making this up? Is that part of that interest payment? If the United States basically can't pay interest on the debt, then you're looking at like a whole world looking at the United States. Oh, no, I'm thinking of just bond. No, yeah, that is a bond. Yeah, okay. Then the entire world is looking at the United States and they're saying that like, oh, well, buying U.S. treasury bonds is no longer a safe investment. And the fact that that would ever happen would be very, very, it would like, it's kind of hard to imagine. Like it could be a catastrophic level event where the entire world begins to bail on holding U.S. dollars or U.S. dollar cash equivalents like treasury bonds. And it's just, that would be a very, very, very bad thing. Also, outside of like a monetary foreign affairs thing, you'd also run into not being able to fund the government. This is why we have like partial government shutdowns, maybe not being able to deliver payments maybe to people with Social Security, depending on what you want to take away from, because you're going to have to borrow money and you no longer can borrow money if you got that debt cap to fund your spending bill. So yeah, there's just like, it would be a lot of things that money wouldn't be going out and we might default, which we should never, that should be impossible. We might default on our debt. For people that hold treasury bonds, they wouldn't get payouts from them. Inside Disney's decision to settle a Trump defamation suit. Talks started and finished on the same day after Disney decided that fighting the lawsuit could potentially hurt the company and protections for the press. When Disney reached a settlement last week with President-elect Donald J. Trump in his defamation case against ABC News, it led to accusations that the company had caved to him. Media law experts predicted the move would embolden Mr. Trump to file other lawsuits that could test the limits of the First Amendment. Disney executives had anticipated the blowback, but they also determined that they had a flawed case and that the company could risk damaging press protections for everyone by continuing to fight, as well as hurt the Disney brand. Concern among Disney lawyers had been rising for months. In July, a federal judge in Florida, Cecilia M. Altanaga, denied the media giant's motion to dismiss the suit, which Mr. Trump had filed in the spring. But more worrisome for Disney, ABC's parent company was her commentary. In a 21-page order, Judge Altanaga, the chief judge in the Southern District of Florida, dismantled Disney's three-pronged argument for tossing the case. Mr. Trump sued after George Stephanopoulos, the star of ABC News anchor, said on the air that Mr. Trump had been found liable for rape in a New York civil trial. In fact, Mr. Trump had been found liable for sexual abuse, although the judge in that case later noted that New York has a narrow legal definition of rape. A reasonable jury could interpret Stephanopoulos' statement as defamatory, Judge Altanaga wrote, and then added an emphasis in italics. Stephanopoulos stated 10 times that a jury or juries had found plaintiff liable for rape. This is the judge's order. Wait. This cause came before the court for a hearing on July 15, 2024 on defamation. Okay, background. In the interview, Stephanopoulos asked Mace about her endorsement of plaintiff, despite the fact that he was found liable for rape. He repeated the phrase 10 times during the interview, at one point stating, judges and two separate juries have found him liable for rape, and the judge affirmed that it was in fact rape. A screenshot of a newspaper headline stating that judge clarifies, yes, Trump was found to have raped E. Jean Carroll. Voters have moved beyond Gen 6, was shown near the end of the broadcast. The exchange was subsequently publicized on social media, in other interviews, and in other coverage by ABC News. The verdict was described as sexual abuse, and the jury's finding the plaintiff did not rape Carroll under New York law was also discussed. Plaintiff now alleges defamation per se and defamation per quod. I don't know what that means. This is a type of defamatory statement or implication that requires additional explanation, interpretation, or extrinsic evidence to prove how it is harmful to the plaintiff's reputation and is distinguishable from defamation per se. Defamation per quod usually requires a plaintiff to establish damages resulting from the defamatory statement. This is in contrast to defamation per se, for which the law typically presumes harm to the plaintiff. Okay, so that's just what normal defamation is called, I think. Like it's either this or that, right? Okay. Wait, make it big. Here we go. As a matter of like law, without knowing much about this more than what I've read in headlines, it would make sense that you always file your like motions to dismiss and everything because, hey, why not? If you can get a case dismissed, that's awesome. But it is not surprising to me that a judge wouldn't allow it to be dismissed because this is an appropriate determination for a jury to make. Like, I do agree with that. That's for sure true. But I'm curious what the dismantling of the case looked like or what that meant. Okay. Defendants raised 3 grounds for dismissal. Okay. Collateral estopped. The doctrine of collateral estoppel precludes a party from relitigating an issue which has previously been decided against him in a proceeding in which he had a fair opportunity to fully litigate the point. Court first addresses thresholding. Okay. Timing. Okay. This argues collateral estoppel is an affirmative defense that cannot be raised at the motion to dismiss stage. Oof. Defendants insist collateral estoppel can be raised at this stage of the proceedings because the defense relies on court records, of which the court may take judicial notice. Okay, on this point, the court agrees with the defendants. All right. Curiously, plaintiff makes his argument under New York law, but cites exclusively to federal cases from federal district courts in New York and the Second Circuit. Although these cases were tried and decided in New York, their buildings are, for the most part, applications and explanations of federal law and the federal rules of civil procedure. Okay, so just to be clear, anytime something is tried in a court that says like the Southern District of Florida or whatever district of New York, when you hear that district word, that always means federal court. It has nothing to do with the state laws. The federal courthouses are just found in certain states, but federal district of or like district of whatever, these are federal courthouses. They have nothing to do with state law. So if Trump's lawyers stated that, that's kind of weird, but defendants correctly briefed the issue under the 11th Circuit precedent, diversity of citizenship actions, blah, blah, blah. We need hardly to add that if there were a relevant circuit split, the district court is bound by controlling 11th Circuit precedent. In any event, the 11th Circuit follows the same framework the plaintiff describes under motion to dismiss be treated as for one summary judgment if it presents matters with collateral estoppel. If the case is in diversity jurisdiction, it will apply state law. Well, it depends on which venue you choose to try the case, no? A basis of federal subject matter jurisdiction that allows federal courts to preside over civil actions where the matter is in controversy exceeds the sum of value of $75,000, including or excluding interest and costs between citizens of different states, citizens of the U.S. state, and citizens of diversity jurisdiction requires complete diversity of citizenship between the plaintiffs and the defendants. That is, no plaintiff may be a citizen of the same state as any defendant. Okay. I don't know what this has to do with what we just said, but okay. Diversity jurisdiction is always federal courts ruling on state issues. Oh, so if there's diversity jurisdiction, then that means that a federal court is going to be where the trial is held, but they're applying state law? Why? Why can't they just hold it in state courts? Okay, well, I don't know about that. I don't know if but okay. Plaintiff does not and cannot object to the court considering choice of law. Having determined the defendants properly raised their collateral estoppel defense, the court next considers what law governs its analysis. Defendants state that because the Carroll cases were litigated in New York law determines their preclusive effect in this case. Okay. All right. Defendants state that because the Carroll case were litigated in New York, plaintiff apparently... Wait, there is federal civil action, right? Or am I making that up? Is there federal civil action? There is, right? Where it doesn't have to be like a federal court ruling on state civil issues, right? Like, is there federal tort? Okay. Parties are only partially correct. Defendants cited cases hold that state collateral estoppel rule, nevertheless, the parties proceed solely under New York law and the court follows suit. It is well suited in this and other circuits the party made through its briefing, waive its choice of law arguments implicitly. Any event, okay. We don't care. Court is not persuaded to bar this action on collateral estoppel defense. Per allegation, the general finding, however, widely replied to while considering a meaningfully distinct context from the facts and values presented. In the case given plaintiff's allegation. Okay, let me... Defendant's next argument is that plaintiff's claims can be dismissed because Stephanoff's statements were substantially true. Plaintiff disagrees, arguing that this determination should not be made on a motion to dismiss. That's probably true. This must be perfectly accurate. Initial inquiry under the doctrine is whether determining whether a statement. Court must in order. Okay. Fair report privilege. Defendant's final argument is that they are protected by Florida's fair report privilege. Florida's fair report privilege grants news organizations a qualified privilege to report accurate information received from government officials. Okay. All right. This is fair. Okay. On Friday, Judge Altanaga dealt Disney another setback. She rejected requests to delay the case and ordered near immediate depositions for Mr. Trump and Mr. Stephanopoulos. Moreover, Disney was also told to turn over all remaining documents related to the case, including pertinent emails and text messages sent by and to Mr. Stephanopoulos by Sunday. Disney responded by opening settlement talks by Friday night. The two sides had reached a deal. The company agreed to donate $15 million to Mr. Trump's future presidential foundation and museum. Mr. Stephanopoulos and ABC News published a statement saying they regret remarks made about Mr. Trump during the March broadcast. The news network also agreed to pay Mr. Trump an additional $1 million legal fees. Concerns about the case among Disney executives and the eventual decision to settle involved multiple considerations, according to 3 people inside the company with knowledge of the discussions, who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss a private matter. The settlement was recommended by Horacio Gutierrez, Disney's general counsel, and approved by Robert A. Iger, Disney's chief executive. It was not elevated to a company board vote. The company was concerned that a jury in Florida, a deep red state that Mr. Trump carried by 13 points in the election last month, would side with the president-elect to potentially award him a sizable sum exceeding what it would cost to settle. Disney could have appealed, of course, and the executives felt the law was on their side, but the appeals process also carried substantial risk. Disney lawyers concluded, at a minimum, the $205 billion company would be litigating against a vindictive sitting president and risking harm to its brand. Disney wants its family-friendly movies, television shows, and theme park rides to appeal to people of all political persuasions. The company recently endured a brutal legal fight with Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida that made it a target of criticism and boycotts among Trump supporters and right-wing pundits. Mr. Trump's animus could also make it harder for ABC News to do its job during the campaign. Mr. Trump denounced ABC as terrible for its handling of his sole debate against Vice President Kamala Harris and mused about stripping the network of its broadcasting license. In the worst case scenario, Disney concluded, fighting the case could lead to the Supreme Court and become a vehicle for Mr. Trump and his allies to overturn the landmark First Amendment decision of New York Times v. Sullivan. That 1964 ruling, as well as a handful of subsequent cases, made it much harder for public figures like Mr. Trump to win libel lawsuits. Disney's legal team, headed by Mr. Gutierrez, ultimately decided that settling, even with the inevitable negative headlines, was the best outcome, that $16 million was a small price to pay for resolving a tricky case. Disney spokesperson declined to comment for this article on Saturday when the deal was made public in the court filings. ABC News and Disney declined to explain the decision. Okay. Interesting. Makes sense, huh? Jesus. Is this accurate? Isn't this really just kicking the can down the road, though? Like, at some point, somebody will have to bring it to the court. Yeah, maybe, but Disney probably stands to lose a ton in a case like that, so they wouldn't want to be the ones to try it, right? Deport immigrants illegally in the U.S. 64% favor, 36% oppose. Jesus. Deport immigrants illegally in the U.S., including longtime residents with jobs, etc. Oppose 58%, favor 42%. Jesus. How much criticism does Disney deserve for this? I mean, I get it, but it's pretty annoying how large that company is, I guess. Makes it so that they probably did something logical, but it sucks for us, I guess, as citizens.
Didn't understand and still don't understand is why we're all required to hate Assad. I mean, just speaking for myself, I don't have strong feelings about Assad one way or the other. Apparently, he's protected the Christians, so I'm grateful for that as a Christian. But why am I required to hate Assad? Tulsi Gabbard went and met with Assad. She's been attacked ever since. Has anyone ever explained why Americans should hate Assad?
Because every regime change operation we ever do, we have to make sure that the opponent is the worst villain since Hitler or Hitler reincarnate.
Some ophthalmologist from London is a bloodthirsty dictator. I didn't really.
We have to say this, and this is part of the psyops or the info war that goes along with regime change operations. This is completely typical. And we're told if we don't stop him now, it's only going to spread. And
he'll be in Des Moines.
Exactly.
What? I'm trying to remember. Was Assad? Is that just a really common last name, or why does the? Because I know that like Assad, who was the leader, like he said, he's just an ophthalmologist from London. Why did the last guy though before him also have the last name Assad? Is it like Muhammad, where a lot of them have the same name, or I don't remember what the answer for that was, but Maybe I'll do some Syrian research later and figure that one out. Did he really blame the Texas shit on green energy? I didn't know that Tucker was a big guy doing this.
Green New Deal has come, believe it or not, to the state of Texas. And we're here with the report. How's it working out so far? Well, the good news is...
The Green New Deal didn't pass. What? How can he even say this? There was no... That didn't happen. This is in 2021? Was this even... I wonder when this originally broadcasted. Was it here, 2021?
All that alternative energy seems to have had a remarkable effect on the climate, as intended. Last night, parts of Texas had a remarkable effect on the climate, as intended. Last night, parts of Texas got to temperatures that we see in Alaska. In fact, they were the same as they were in Alaska. So global warming is no longer a pressing concern in Houston. We've solved that problem. The bad news is
the implication that the windmills made everything freeze?
They don't have electricity. The windmills froze, so the power grid failed. Millions of Texans woke up to boil their water because with no electricity, it couldn't be purified. The ironically named Electric Reliability Council of Texas, which oversees the grid, had no solution to any of this. They simply told people to stop using so much power to keep warm. So in Houston, hundreds of shivering Texans headed to the Civic Center like refugees to keep from freezing to death. Some people in Texas almost certainly did freeze to death today. That's what happens when it gets that cold. Later,
I thought Texas was like our Republican stronghold though. Like everything about this story on its face is so stupid. I think the issue here, can somebody find this quote? Because I have this quote in my head, but there's no way this is real. I thought the quote was that from, I don't remember, was it Abbott? Was he the governor at the time? I thought the quote was that like they never planned on the temperatures ever getting this cold because the coldness of that winter was a black swan event that would happen like only once a decade, I thought he said. And I feel like everybody made fun of it. Is that true? Did he actually say that? He was like, wait, once a decade? Somebody find out if that quote is real or not.
This week we'll learn just how many more were killed by carbon monoxide poisoning as they tried to keep warm with jury-rigged heaters and barbecues and car exhaust. That happens every time. When the power goes out, even advanced societies become primitive and dangerous. People die. We've seen it happen repeatedly in California for years now. Rolling blackouts in a purportedly first world state that is slipping steadily into chaos. But in Texas? Who saw that coming? And not just because Texas is mostly Republican. If there's one thing you would think Texas would be able to do, it's keep the lights on. Most electricity comes from natural gas, and Texas produces more of that than any place on the continent. There are huge natural gas deposits all over Texas. Texas is an oil and gas state, famously. Running out of energy in Texas is like starving to death at the grocery store. You can only do it on purpose. And Texas did. Rather than celebrate and benefit from their state's vast natural resources, politicians took the fashionable route and became recklessly reliant on so-called alternative energy, meaning windmills. 15 years ago, there were virtually no wind farms in Texas. Last year, roughly a quarter of all electricity generated in the state came from wind. Local politicians were pleased by this. They bragged about it like there was something virtuous about destroying the landscape and degrading the power grid. Just last week, Governor Greg
What is this community note? I can't believe an American congressman wore the Russian army uniform to Congress. Russia owns our politicians. Readers added context that they thought people might want to know. Israel owns American politicians, not Russia. Brian Mast is wearing an IDF uniform, not a Russian one. Okay. Don't quote me on this because it's been a while since I reread any of this, but I think Texas's power grid is unique in that they're the only one that is like totally disconnected from all of the other states because they want to have like their own little free market power grid where you can like buy and sell energy dynamically on the grid. And apparently they had fucked up in their preparing for cold enough winter bullshit. And then when the power started to go, it was like $1,000 per kilowatt hour or some crazy shit. Like the prices went massively higher and they couldn't get energy from any other part of the country. And they just got like completely fucking ass blasted.
Greg Abbott proudly accepted something called the Wind Leadership Award, given with gratitude by a company getting rich from green energy. So it was all working great until the day it got cold outside. The windmills failed, like the silly fashion accessories they are, and people in Texas died.
What about, I thought you said they had the highest amount of natural gas. Did they just like turn it all off or?
A lot more of them than died at the Capitol on January 6th, by the way, just for reference.
What is the comparison?
Now, we're telling you all of this not to beat up on the state of Texas. It's a great state, actually. But to give you some sense about what's about to happen to you, to every state. And we're not speculating on that. Here's the new president explaining his plan.
In my view, we've already waited too long to deal with this climate crisis. We can't wait any longer. That's why I'm signing today an executive order to supercharge our administration's ambitious plan to confront the existential threat of climate change. It is an existential threat.
Just reading this.
What did he even sign to do? What was it going to do?
Script. Climate crisis, existential threat, ambitious plan. You hear those phrases a lot, and you'll notice that they are all suspiciously non-precise. So what do they mean for you? Well, they mean higher energy prices for starters. Gas is already...
Wouldn't the most like cringe gay states that are the most like progressive and woke, why wouldn't they be failing? Wouldn't you expect that to happen to them and not Texas? Like what happened there? Florida has its own power grid. Wait, is that true? Hold on. By the way, George Bush, when he was governor of Texas, was the one who pushed for more wind power. Bush gave Texas windmills more than 15 years ago, as Tucker claimed. The Texas interconnection is an alternating current power grid, a wide area synchronous grid that covers most of Texas. Oh, Florida does have its own, I think. %25 of their power comes from wind, but it was definitely somehow the wind power's fault. True. I don't know anything about Florida's grid here, but it seems like it's not even all of Florida, no? Like the Panhandle here has like Eastern interconnection, whatever they're part of that, but okay.
Already up, in case you haven't noticed, electricity will follow. Higher costs hurt the weakest. Inflation always does.
I seem really holding firm on not covering breaking news. Wait, what? Was there breaking news? Did I miss some breaking news?
But it's worse than that. Green energy inevitably means blackouts. And someday that may change as technology progresses. But as of right now, in the current state of technology, that is true. Green energy means a less reliable power grid, period. It means failures like the ones we're seeing now in Texas. That's not a talking point. It's not a political slogan. We're not taking money from ExxonMobil to say it. Again, that is true. It's science. So, of course, they're denying it. Here's a new climate czar taking a quick break from spewing carbon in his private jet to lecture the rest of us about a topic he personally knows nothing about, private sector jobs and how more windmills are going to generate tons of them.
And the President of the United States has expressed in every comment he has made about climate the need to grow the new jobs that pay better, that are cleaner.
Why are conservatives generally opposed to green energy or climate change initiatives? I don't know. That maybe that opinion will change now because if you're a newer, like especially if you're a maggot, I don't know if you know why you're supposed to be against climate change. Because the older neocons, the way that they communicated it was climate change only existed so that Democrats could control your life. And the only reason Democrats would pretend to care about things like climate change is so that they could tell you what kind of car to drive, so that they could tell you exactly how to live your life, basically. But I don't know if the new age like maggots have communicated that. That was like the neocons. So I don't know. 2 minutes behind, but on the Texas power issue, that level of cold and how long it lasted, I'm pretty sure it never had happened, and it wasn't windmills not working. It was transformers exploding. Yeah, it was coldish. Chill. Okay. Damn, do we want to watch this? On Philip Seymour Hoffman. Oh wait, there was a Trump press conference. Somebody look at this. One sec.
This February of 2021, a major winter storm made its way through the U.S. Central Plains, setting all-time records for low temperatures across the country. One of the biggest impacts of the storm happened here in Texas, where people across the state suffered extended outages of electricity and water. It was one of the worst winter weather events in history, creating loss of life and economic impacts that will take years to unfold. When disaster strikes, the flurry of political positioning and finger-pointing can make it difficult to understand what really happened. This is especially true for complex systems of infrastructure like the power grid, where most people really need a little more context and background than can be provided in a 500-word news story, but a little more boiled down than those discussions between economists and electrical engineers on Twitter. So, for the first time ever on this channel, by the way, I'm talking about a current event. This is a developing story, and we're still learning the details and consequences of what happened during the storm. But I've received a lot of requests for a video like this, and I hope we can provide some clarity and technical knowledge to elevate the dialogue surrounding this disaster. I'm Grady, and this is Practical Engineering. Today's episode is the story of the 2021 Texas power grid emergency. Before diving into the chronology of events, I want to just provide a quick overview of some important technical topics. I actually have a series of videos explaining the power grid in greater detail linked below, so check that out if you want to learn more. A wide area interconnection, which is the technical term for a power grid, is the solution to the #1 problem of the supply and demand of electricity: volatility. There aren't many feasible ways to store large quantities of electricity, so for the most part, the supply and demand have to be matched simultaneously. Electricity is produced, transmitted, and consumed all in the exact same instant. Managing those ebbs and flows is a very difficult thing to do unless large groups of power producers and users are connected together, smoothing out the volatility of demands, making them more predictable, and the supply, making it possible to have larger, more efficient generating facilities. Interconnection increases the efficiency and reliability of electricity supply, and the majority of Texans are served by a single interconnection that covers most of the state. I'll be referring to it as the Texas power grid. Just because there are so many power producers and users interconnected doesn't mean there is no volatility in supply and demand. These are some example demand curves on the Texas grid. You can see that demand is always changing throughout the day. When power demand drops due to mild weather or at night when people are asleep, we need generators to shut down. Otherwise, the frequency of the AC power will speed up above 60 Hz. When demand spikes, we need generators spun up to match it. Otherwise, the extra load will bog down the physical generators and the frequency of the AC power will fall below 60 Hz. The consequences of the AC frequency deviating by too much are massive because every generator in the entire system is magnetically coupled. If parts of the system lose synchronization, both generators and equipment connected to the grid can tear themselves apart. Because of that, most parts of the grid, including generation facilities, have breakers that trip to isolate equipment if the frequency deviates too far. The breakers in your house monitor electrical current. If you plug in too many things to one circuit, the breaker will trip. These work in the exact same way, except they monitor frequency. And unlike in your house where restoring power is a quick fix, large power generating stations don't turn on and off with the flip of a switch. So matching supply and demand to maintain a stable frequency is the most critical part of managing the power grid. In Texas, the entity in charge of this task is ERCOT, the Electric Reliability Council of Texas. This is a nonprofit corporation with board members representing basically every segment of the electricity market, from generators to utilities to consumers. ERCOT's job is to oversee the entire system. They don't own or operate any facilities themselves, but they tell operators of generation facilities when to start and stop running, depending on the electrical demand. ERCOT also manages scheduled outages. Owners have to have approval from ERCOT before they take facilities offline for maintenance. Finally, ERCOT manages the wholesale market of electricity by setting prices and handling the transactions between power sellers and buyers. The week before Valentine's Day 2021 had already been a wintry one in many parts of Texas, but as the weekend drew near, the forecast started to make clear that the next week would be extraordinarily cold. On February 8th, a full week before things really hit the fan, ERCOT had already started issuing public communications about very high expected electrical demands across the state. They canceled or delayed approval for a large number of scheduled outages to make sure that as much electrical infrastructure as possible would be in service in anticipation of the storm. They worked with the Texas Railroad Commission, which confusingly is in charge of the oil and gas industry.
Hassan's title is Free Luigi. Wow, championing murder on Twitch? Sounds pretty violent.
to increase the priority of delivering natural gas to power plants. They also worked with the U.S. Department of Energy to get permission for some power plants to temporarily exceed their emission limits from the EPA during peak needs for electricity. All this to say, the folks managing the power grid were expecting exceptional strain on the system and had already started working the week beforehand to prepare. When the storm did hit on Valentine's Day, it really was one for the history books. 3 major facts illustrate this point. First, it was extremely cold. This figure from the National Weather Service shows the departure from normal temperatures for 3 historical winter weather events in the southern U.S. plains. The one on the right is the 2021 event. Essentially, the entire southern U.S. had average temperatures more than 25 degrees Fahrenheit or 15 degrees Celsius below normal. All-time low temperature records were set in nearly every city across the region. It was the coldest many places had practically ever been. The next point, which you can see also in this figure, is that it was not just a local event. This storm had significant impacts across the entire state of Texas and beyond. Finally, the duration of frigid temperatures was just so long. This figure from the National Weather Service shows that large portions of the state were below freezing for...
I like how he was making fun of the fact that people wanted to do something about climate change and that windmills are like the devil here. But while he's making fun of that fact, it's happening during an ahistorically horrible climate event that people said would happen if climate change continued on the path that it was. But okay, good one, dude.
For more than 7 continuous days. That might not seem like a lot to those of you in northern climes, maybe even a welcome respite, but in most parts of Texas, it is unheard of. The state started Sunday with about a quarter of its total electrical capacity already out of service, mainly due to the weather the week before. These outages were about half wind power and half natural gas generators. Even with that lack of capacity, as night began to fall that Sunday, Texas hit its all-time winter peak electrical demand of nearly 70,000 megawatts, and it met that full demand. The previous peak was 66,000. Everyone in the state was running their heaters to the max trying to stay warm. As the evening continued, though, it became clear to ERCOT and the utilities that the amount of electricity available on the grid may not be able to continue to meet the demand. An advisory was issued that electrical reserves were low at around 11:30 p.m. Not long after that, generation facility after facility started tripping offline, reducing the capacity to meet the high demand. Texas has a diverse portfolio of power generators. The largest segment of that is natural gas, making up about half of the capacity. The second segment is wind turbines at about 30%. The rest of the generation fleet is made up of coal-powered plants, nuclear plants, and solar farms. This graph shows the outages of each generation type during the winter storm. You can see that wind and natural gas make up the majority of the lost capacity, but no type of power plant was spared during the storm. The most important part of this figure is the natural gas line. Plant after plant went offline to the tune of 15,000 megawatts of capacity with this.
Wait, what? When did we get to the part of the video where it was the wind power that caused this all to happen? I thought only the wind one failed. Why would anything else fail? I don't understand.
In the span of 8 hours. All the details are still coming out about what really happened, but there was a lot that we know went wrong. Natural gas wells and pipelines are particularly vulnerable to cold temperatures. Not only does a gas stream contain water vapor that can freeze by itself, that water vapor can also combine with hydrocarbons to create hydrates that solidify at temperatures well above freezing. Combine this with the fact that many roads were completely impassable during the storm, it was nearly impossible for some gas suppliers to keep things flowing. That despite the fact that the wholesale price of natural gas during the storm skyrocketed to more than 100 times its normal price due to the incredible demand, with power plants competing with residential homes that use gas for heat. At that price, suppliers were doing essentially everything in their power to deliver gas to customers, but it just wasn't enough. Or in some cases it was enough, but the generators couldn't afford to operate their plants with such a high cost for fuel. But it wasn't just gas power plants that struggled, and it wasn't just about fuel. Wind turbines were shut down due to icing, solar panels were covered in snow, one of the few nuclear units in Texas tripped offline because of cold weather issues with its water supply. Basically, the entire system was ill-prepared for a storm of this magnitude. Texas does have a few connections to other power grids to help alleviate supply problems during emergencies, but those grids were suffering under similar conditions without much extra electricity to spare. This graph shows the total outages during the event. With that huge spike of generators going offline the morning after Valentine's Day, the state had nearly half its total capacity gone during one of the highest periods of electrical demand on record. Without any remaining reserve of resources, ERCOT had only one option left to keep supply and demand in sync: shed load. This is the technical term for what is essentially turning off parts of the power grid, in other words, disconnecting customers to reduce total demands on the system. Here's a simplified version of how this works. ERCOT tells the transmission operators they need to take X megawatts off the grid. Those megawatts are distributed roughly evenly between the operators you may have heard of, like Encore, Centerpoint, CPS Energy, Austin Energy, etc., based on their share of the total load. Each operator has a plan in place for how to shed load within their system when required. It's not something they decide on the fly. Certain circuits critical to public health and safety, like hospitals, are prioritized. The other non-critical circuits are usually shut off in a rolling manner at 15 to 30-minute intervals. That way, the inconvenience of lost service is spread out more evenly across the entire service area. Of course, in many places during the storm, that is not what happened, and this graph is the key to why. As more and more resources stripped offline so quickly, the frequency of the Texas power grid began to drop. ERCOT continued ordering additional load to be shed from the system, trying to keep up with both the rising demand from the cold weather and the quickly failing power plants. At about 1:50 a.m., the frequency fell below 59.4 hertz. It doesn't sound that significant, but this is a critical threshold for grid stability. Power plant controls are set to automatically disconnect if the frequency stays below 59.4 Hz for more than 9 minutes. In such a situation, as each generator trips, the frequency would quickly plummet until just about every circuit breaker on the grid had disconnected. 4 minutes and 37 seconds is all that separated Texas from a complete grid collapse. Without the urgent action to continue shedding load from the system, many might still be without power in Texas a month later. That's because recovering from a complete collapse, called a black start of the power grid, is an immense technical challenge. So much equipment would need to be inspected, repaired, or replaced from the damage caused by the collapse. Only then could we start bringing generators and customers online slowly but surely to maintain balance between supply and demand throughout the process. If anything goes wrong during a black start and frequency deviates too far, breakers will trip to protect the equipment and you have to start all over. I am not an economist, but the energy market is an important part of this story, so I'll do my best to summarize the key points here. Unlike other markets that pay generators to secure capacity for the future, the wholesale electricity market in Texas is energy only. That means if you put power on the grid, you get paid for it. You get no extra points for having generation capacity when it wasn't needed. The only reason it's feasible to invest in future capacity is the scarcity pricing of wholesale electricity. When demand is high, the price goes way up. In theory, this incentivizes generators to not only make short-term investments to ensure their facilities are up and running during peak demands, but also long-term investments in plants that can spin up during these times when prices are sky high to capitalize on the energy scarcity. This type of price model also favors intermittent sources of electricity like wind and solar, which would struggle to compete in a market that valued firm capacity. While it normally varies between $30 and $50 per megawatt hour on an average day, the wholesale electricity price went up to the cap of $9,000 per megawatt hour during the storm and stayed that high for days. The result was that providers spent more money on wholesale electricity in a week than would normally be spent in 4 average years. That's with the extreme load shedding that occurred and doesn't include the incredible prices that some utilities had to pay for natural gas. Most energy users won't see those massive costs, at least not right away. That's because nearly every retail provider offers a fixed or at least tiered rate for electricity to their customers, bearing the dips and swings of the wholesale price using a wide variety of financial tools and long-term contracts to try and hedge against the extreme volatility. Prudent planning can only take you so far in an event like this, though, and at least one utility has already filed for bankruptcy protection after the extreme energy bill came due. Other retail energy providers use a different strategy to manage the market unpredictability, pass the risk on to their customers by offering direct access to wholesale energy rates for a monthly fee. The idea is that some users may prefer to manage their own demand, cutting back on electricity usage when rates are high and shifting usage to times when rates are low. Unfortunately, many of these customers were misled about or misunderstood the incredible volatility of the wholesale energy market to which they were being exposed, and there are many reports of residential energy bills in the thousands of dollars. During the peak of the event, ERCOT ordered 20,000 megawatts of load to be shed from the system. That's the equivalent of turning off half of Texas on a normal day. And the load shed orders lasted for 3 days straight, from early morning on the 15th to the end of the 18th. What should have been rolling outages couldn't roll, because many utilities didn't have any non-critical circuits on their system left to turn off. The result was that millions of Texans were plunged into darkness, in some cases for days, without heat or light during one of the coldest winter storms on record. My house lost power in the middle of the second night of outages, and it was already 42 degrees Fahrenheit or 6 degrees Celsius that morning before we relocated to a family member's house. And we were the lucky ones. Many were not so fortunate to have friends or family with power nearby, or even to have roads clear enough to safely make the trek. The selection of which circuits were left on versus off seemed arbitrary or even capricious to many. Water utilities started losing service both because of frozen lines and lack of power available for pumping, reducing the availability of yet another basic human necessity to huge swaths of the population. Even though we had avoided the catastrophe of a total grid collapse, we did not avoid a crisis. Many lives were lost, and the economic impacts of this emergency are untold. I have my own opinions about what could have or should have been done better during the storm, and by whom, but this is not the place. My goal with this video is to try to summarize the facts of this tragic event in a way that is approachable by people who don't have a working knowledge of the intricacies of the power grid. Many are still recovering from the storm and will be for years to come. Please feel free to share your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. All I ask is that you be kind and respectful to one another. Thank you for watching, and let me know what you think.
Okay, there you go. Now you know what happened with the power grid.
Do you think the presence of evil is kickstarting people to wonder about the good?
That's what happened to me.
That's what happened to you?
Oh yeah, I had a direct experience with it.
In the milieu of journalism, or just?
Nope, in my bed at night, and I got attacked while I was asleep with my wife and 4 dogs in the bed and mauled. Physically mauled.
In a spiritual attack by a demon?
Yeah, by a demon. Or by something unseen that left.
Is that right?
Claw marks on my sides, on my...
So he left physical marks?
Oh, they're still there. Yeah, yeah.
Man goes to sleep with 4 dogs in his bed. Wakes up with scratch marks on his side. Concludes it was a spiritual demon.
1.5 years ago.
Was your wife terrified? I know you were.
I wasn't. I was totally confused. I woke up and I couldn't breathe, and I thought I was going to suffocate, and I walked around outside, and then I walked in, and my wife and dogs had not woken up, and they're very light sleepers. And then I had these terrible pains on my rib cage and on my shoulder, and I was just in my boxer shorts, and I went and flipped on the light in the bathroom, and I had 4 claw marks on either side underneath my arms and on my left shoulder. And they're bleeding.
Wait, they were bleeding?
They're bleeding, yeah. No actual claw marks. And I sleep on my side, so I wasn't clawing myself. I don't have long nails. And they didn't fit my hands anyway. But yeah, that happened. So I'm not from a world where things like that happen. I never heard of anything like that happening before. I had no idea what that was. I knew it was spiritual immediately.
You did? Okay, that was gonna be my question.
Yeah. I don't understand to this day. I'm not gonna put it forward.
You didn't try to refute the spiritual part in your own mind. You went right into the...
Well, it didn't make any sense, and it doesn't now.
So, but I'm not from a, what do they call it, faith tradition that talks about things like that or even acknowledges their existence. Like, there's nothing like that. I've never heard anybody say anything like that in my whole life.
What was the next day like?
Well, the next morning I woke up and I thought, that was the weirdest dream I've ever had. And then I saw blood on my sheets and I realized that was not a dream at all. I was like, oh, my assistant was like the only evangelical Christian I know, well enough to call something bizarre like that, totally bizarre like that. And she said, oh, yeah, no, that happens. Yeah, people are attacked in their bed by demons. What? What are you even talking about? Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not leaving anything out, and I'm not pretending to understand that I can.
This is the most popular TV show pundit, or was in the United States, in my country.
Only say what happened to me, and that did happen to me. And then I was seized with this very intense desire to read the Bible, which I then started without any study aids or anything. I bought a Bible that didn't have any. I'm not interested in editorializing in the Bible. I just want to read it and see what's in there myself. I have very low levels of trust for Christian pastors, most of whom, I'm just not a fan at all. And sorry to say that, but that's how I feel. And so I don't want to hear other people's opinions. I just want to see what's in there. And so I spent a year and a half reading it, and then I started rereading it. And it was just a transformative experience for me, but I'm not, holding myself out as someone from whom you could get theological advice, because I'm not. Of course. I don't know. I don't understand any of it. But yeah, that happened.
God allowed the demon?
I have no idea what happened. All I know is I was dead asleep with my wife and dogs, and I woke up with claw marks.
He raw dogged the Bible?
On my rib cage, underneath my arms. And it didn't even make sense. My arms went, anyway, whatever. No one has to believe me. I don't care. But that happened to me. And so I just was like, wow, that's real. Whatever that is, I'm even not sure what it is.
It's very real. And so then that presence of that evil launches something.
Why do you have for sale? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought they said religious family. It's religious facility. My bad.